Okay, this is Institutions and Policy in Iran, Objective 3, regarding how contemporary issues are affecting Iranian domestic and foreign policy. And if you take a look at letter A there, I want to review real quick that the most powerful policymaking bodies are the legislature, the Mejlis, and the Guardian Council. The Expediency Council will also step in when needed. However, laws start in a lot of different places and can be blocked in a lot of different places as well, which makes it kind of confusing. Now, because of this, there are a lot of factions in Iranian policymaking. The first one, if you take a look at letter B, one would be the conservative versus the reformist activity that's going on there. The conservatives, as you would imagine, just like the United States, are very traditional, very right-wing. In the case of Iran, they're very theocratic. The reformers are a little more democratic. Now, while the conservatives believe that politics and religion should be one and the same, no separation of church and state, and they dislike westernization and modernization, the reformists, like you might see here, are more modernist. They believe in Sharia, but they would like to see the church and state to be separate, and that's a critical part to understand. So please take a look at B1C and circle that, they would like church and state to be separate. Very unusual in Iran. A lot of the reformists also like the idea of westernization and modernization. So again, like we said, they like these two ladies here, they believe in Sharia, they believe in Islamic law, they're willing to follow it, but they also like the idea of being able to wear a pair of jeans and have a cell phone. Now, that isn't the only faction that exists, and I want you to jot a couple things down with B2 here, the statists versus the free marketers. Essentially what you have here are differences between socialist policies that involve high taxes, public ownership, price controls, that type of thing, and free marketers who want more capitalist policies of private ownership, no price controls, competition. Now, there are conservatives and reformists on both sides of this debate, but providing goods and services like these is still a major debate in Iran today. Should they be provided by the government, or should private enterprise rule the day? But regardless of whether or not they're conservative or reformist or statist or free market or whatever the case may be, one thing that can't be denied is the influence of this city, Qom, which is the basic center of Iranian theocracy. They are influential in policy making because most Iranians respect them, whether they're conservative or reformist or whatever the case may be. Now, if you take a look at the map here, here is the capital city of Tehran right here. And the city of Qom is located about 60 miles south of Tehran, so it's far enough away to have its own influence, but still close enough to be influential on Tehran. And when you take a look at that, that makes it a pretty significant part of Iranian policy. Now, for the most part, Qom is a city of seminaries where they train Islamic clerics and basic scholars on the study of Islam. For that reason, they don't get too politically active, but their opinions are very important. It's almost like they're the wise men of the Iranian theocracy and Iranian policy making. One interesting thing to note here, if you take a look at C2, is that most of the people at Qom, the scholars at Qom, believe that men of religion should not get involved in politics. Now, for that reason, they're kind of uncomfortable with Iran as a theocracy, and it adds to the overall debate between the conservatives and the reformers, because the reformers are basically saying that the Ayatollah Khomeini's idea of Velayat al-Faqih, which was based on Islamic tradition, should really not exist. That philosophy is based on the idea that they have a God-given right to rule over the Iranian people. And the scholars at Qom are saying that's not necessarily the case. So conservatives are listening to the Ayatollah Khomeini saying we have that right to rule, whereas reformers are basically saying, no, you don't. Velayat al-Faqih is something that's made up by the Ayatollah Khomeini and not really a belief of the scholars at Qom. They want to see the Iranian government officials stay separate from religion and believe that only with the next coming of the hidden imam the last descendant of Muhammad, that would be the only time that church and state should join together. Taking a look at letter D here, Iranian domestic policy is pretty much dominated by two things, the oil issue and population policy. Now, in terms of oil, you can see how important, if you take a look right here, you can see how important oil is to Iran. I mean, they're the fourth largest oil producer in the world. That, though, doesn't mean that it's not creating problems. So the main reason is the instability of prices. Them going up and down all the time kind of messes with the Iranian economy. Now, on one hand, if you take a look at D1A1, the wealthy love what it's done for Iran. It's given them wealth, it's made them elite, and it's essentially created a modern middle class. It's actually boosted business. If you take a look here, this is a new seaport off the Iranian coast that's meant just for exporting oil. So it's done well in terms of creating jobs and things of that nature. Now, reformers are all very much okay with that, but traditional conservatives don't like it. Number one, they feel like religion should be the most important thing in Iranian life, not the economy. And they feel like oil has brought influences to Iran that are threatening to Islam, like the influences of Western countries, modernization, and things of that nature. Also, if you take a look at D1B, there's a major debate still today about government subsidies for people for things like health care, welfare, different kinds of safety nets that exist. The Iranian people, a lot of them are concerned that the government is concentrating so much on the oil industry that they're leaving the Iranian people behind. Not to mention the fact that Iranian oil fields may not be as dominant as once thought. If you take a look at DC and circle that, because this is pretty significant, Iran currently imports 40% of its oil. Now, the main reason for this is that domestic gas prices are so low. They've made them so low to make them affordable that domestic refiners don't see a point in producing it. If they can't make any money off it, there's no need to do it. That puts the Iranian government in a position where they have to actually import a lot of oil because their own domestic producers don't see a point in making it. This also leads to oil smuggling across borders, oil being illegally brought into Iran. As you can imagine, none of this helps in terms of getting Iranians jobs as opposed to benefiting employment in other countries. The other major issue that has become a problem, although it's calmed itself in recent years, is population policy. When the Ayatollah Khomeini took over in 1979, Iranians were encouraged to have large families. If you take a look down at D2 on the outline. Now, this was basically further promoted in 2006 when the president of Iran came out and just straight said to people, let's have a baby boom. The population did boom, but as those kids started getting older, especially from the earlier years of the Ayatollah Khomeini, there were major unemployment rates. Policies were put in place to lower the birth rate, not to the extreme of China, but just in terms of a reward system, and they actually worked due to some good fortune. At the time, Iranian women, and I know this sounds like it's a little strange to hear, but Iranian women were actually given more opportunities in a couple different areas. The first one was in jobs. Iranian women were, even though they're restricted in a lot of ways by Sharia or Islamic law, Iranian women were giving a lot of job opportunities. And they were also being given far more educational opportunities than they'd ever experienced before. As a result, with women taking advantage of those job and educational opportunities, and the fact that other incentives were put in place to have fewer kids, birth rates declined and Iran got their population issues basically under control. But probably the biggest issue, if you take a look at letter E on the outline, has to do with Iranian foreign policy and foreign affairs. Back in the mid-2000s, the Iranians went as far as to declare the Holocaust a myth and said that Israel should be wiped away off the face of the earth. This was not a real good start to modern-day foreign policy relations for the Iranians, and they were also generally hostile to the United States, although that has gotten better in recent years, we think. The United States has led the blocking of Iran's membership to numerous world organizations like the United Nations, GATT, the World Council, things like that. The U.S., despite trying to improve their relationship with Iran, has blocked it as well because, frankly, we're not too sure that we can trust them. The main reason for that has to do with nuclear energy. If you take a look at this map here, there are various sites where it's obvious that Iran is involved in nuclear energy, but what is it being used for? Well, the Iranians maintain that even though their nuclear program has been under a lot of attention and under the microscope after the 9/11 attacks of 2001, Iran still maintains that their nuclear program is primarily for energy. Now, if the program is for energy, that's okay. If it's for weapons, well, that's distinctly not okay, especially when they've said it's for energy purposes. Now, obviously, that's not been the case, and whenever Iran has been called out on that, they've basically refused to cooperate. Numerous attempts have been made to get Iran to kind of stem their nuclear proliferation, but Iran routinely says that they're not going to do that, and that they're going to make nuclear missiles if they want to. So where does that leave us? Well, it's kind of hard to say. The rest of the world is keeping an eye on Iran, and as the United States and Iran kind of square off with each other in this regard, there's really not a whole lot of telling what the future is going to hold. Okay, thanks for listening.